All right. It's 10 a.m., so I'm going to get started. Welcome to this Ask the Expert session. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. Before we get started, I just wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. This webinar is produced by the Underserved Victims Population Training Project, a project from the Center of Innovation and Resources. Funding from this project comes from the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services, Victim Services Branch, with funding made possible through the United States Department of Justice Victims of Crime Act. For those of you who can hear me, this might seem obvious, but I just wanted to remind everyone to turn on their speakers in order to hear the presentation. Use the Q&A feature to ask the presenter any questions that you may have. We will begin with questions that have been emailed prior to the live session. You may ask these questions anonymously by checking the anonymous box on the Q&A feature. The chat panel is where you can ask the tech support questions. We will answer any questions immediately in the chat panel. An evaluation will automatically populate during this session. Please take a few minutes after the session to fill out the evaluations. We value the feedback we receive from all of the training events. So I'm just going to get started with we're meeting Dr. Sayida Peprah. I'm just going to get started with a brief intro. Dr. Sayida Peprah has a BA in psychology from Spelman College and an MA and PsyD in clinical psychology with a multicultural specialization from the California School of Professional Psychology at Alliant International University. Dr. Sayida Peprah is both a licensed and clinical psychologist and a certified birth doula, which is a pregnancy, labor, and delivery support person. She has a multifaceted career as a clinical psychologist, professor of cultural psychology from the University of Phoenix, and a speaker and consultant on topics of cultural competency, mental and maternal mental health. Dr. Peprah has worked with foster youth in a professional capacity as a therapist through family preservation programs and CPS. Additionally, she is a former foster parent for teen mothers and older girls in Los Angeles County. So we're going to get started with questions for Dr. Sayida Peprah. Welcome. Thank you for being here, Dr. Peprah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to get started with the questions that were previously submitted, and feel free to ask any questions through the Q&A feature along the way as well. So our first question from a previously submitted person is, how can I help a teen mom with her parenting without overstepping boundaries or coming off as controlling?
I think, the first thing is sort of like how you set your mind around like what your role is. Because if you're coming in like with a really nurturing energy, like the way that you would ideally with your own daughter, like who happens to be a teenage mom, and you realize that she needs a lot of nurturing, but she's also in an experience that she's going to have to be autonomous, like as a mother, but then she may not exactly be ready for that. Like you're sort of checking in to see where she's ready and where you need to fall back and then where you need to step in. And it's sort of really organic. I think one of the biggest challenges with foster care is because of the lack of connection sometimes with the foster parent and the mom, and not because of maybe interpersonally they don't want to be connected, but sort of like the scenario for a lot of foster parents is like you're given this teen mom or whoever the foster child is without a lot of preparation, and then you're sort of like thrown into the relationship. So if you haven't really formed that sort of like natural attachment to each other where her personality and she trusts that you love her and care for her, even though you're giving her direction, even though you're maybe giving her critical feedback, then it can be difficult and it can feel like you're being controlling. So I think the first thing is to establish the relationship, really. Otherwise, kind of no matter what you do, it could be taken wrong. And, we all sort of know that in our own relationships, like until you get into a trust space, you a lot of times may have some guardedness with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind everyone, for those of you who have just joined us as well, to not forget to submit any questions to the Q&A feature. So we'll answer those questions along the way. So our second question that was submitted is, what can a foster parent do when you have a foster teen mom whose parents sometimes and other times parties and goes out with her friends and leaves the baby to the foster parent?
Well, I mean, I would say, first of all, that if that's already happening, there's going to be a really strong need to step back and like reestablish boundaries and expectations, because the mom really shouldn't feel that that's an option, that she sort of walks out and leaves the babies unattended without care. Um, it's really important for everybody in the beginning to get the clarity of those roles, that this is your baby. She is, or he is not my foster child. You are the one under my care, and I'm here to help you parent, your children, and to be supportive to you and to help you grow in the process of parenting. And so with that in mind, it shouldn't be the case that a mom is leaving the babies. But I know the nature of, young people, and, I've had experiences with teen moms who were very truant in their personality and the way that they were sort of as teenage girls. And you would expect a level of attachment to their babies and not wanting to leave the babies without care. But I recognize that that's not the case, and not all teen moms are going to leave their baby just like that and go to parties. But for those that do, it's going to be important then to step back and clarify those boundaries. And I would say, to start off, when you have the teen mom, that you have really clear rules and expectations for when she's going to have break time. And so, and what that means. And I would always encourage, to start from the beginning the way you want it to be at the end. It's really hard to come back when you're sort of like doing behavioral training with people, which is basically what we're doing a lot with our children and people in our care, setting up, well, how are you going to do this? And what is the expectation here? That when she wants to make plans, she has to make plans for herself and her children, and that there isn't, it's natural in the young person's mind to be very self-centered. And so you're also working with someone who's developing an awareness that they're not the only person in the universe as well. And so that's, that's the fun and the challenge of the soup of parenting teens all together. And so just sort of laying out that understanding. And for some of them, it means that you need to sit down and have conversations about what that looks like actually demonstrate it. Don't just expect her to know that when she wants to go out with her friends, she has to have a plan for childcare, which means she needs to ask you if you're going to watch the children, which means she needs to coordinate with your schedule, and she needs to know that sometimes it's not going to be convenient for you. And if she is allowed, all of the, especially the teens that you have in foster care, they kind of come with their own set of rules. Like, they're a lot more complicated, I think, than the younger ones who are like in your complete care. You're the only one that really can watch them unless you have an emergency sitter as a part of the Child Protective Services contract. The teens can spend time by themselves. Many of them can have up to 4 hours alone in the community without your observation and, kind of on their own. And so it could be a potential also that she has connections with family, with the child's father, or other people that have been given access to have connection with her and the children. And if that's something that the social worker is comfortable with, her having her child, in the care of a family member who is, going through the process, then that may be something to consider too, that you're not the only one that can watch the child. But definitely, I would say the strategy is to have a plan for when you're going to do something, if it's going to the mall, if it's going out with friends, if it's just going, to have your me time, or out with, the child's father alone, or whatever it is. What is your plan for childcare? And that's the fun of it. Having them learn, you can't ask me the night before, or you can't ask me an hour before, or whatever works for you. You may be very flexible, and you may be a completely stay-at-home foster mom, and that's perfectly fine for you. But if you are a working foster parent and you have a schedule and you like to have your own free time, then it's going to really require some negotiation. And I would recommend using the technology that we have. And I use that in my own family. We all share a Google Calendar. I have a family calendar that's in a whiteboard that we all, I'm the only one that really puts stuff on there. Sometimes the children will add things that they want me to know are happening at their school. But we all have it in proximity. So we know our schedule. So they know that they can't ask me to be somewhere on a day that I'm supposed to be doing something else, and vice versa. So I think those are some suggestions that I'd make.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so our next question is how can the foster parent set boundaries without coming off as unsupportive?
Again, lead with trust and relationship, and let that be the most important thing that you're hearing me say. There's technique, but there's also, you have to have that relationship. Um, to set boundaries, when you set them early, it feels less restrictive and less confrontational, and more like, let's come up with a plan together, than when you set boundaries later. And so you can seem like a very supportive foster parent if you start off with, hey, you're about to have a baby. Let's say she's just pregnant. And there's going to be lots of, that's honestly like one of the best times to sit and talk about what the plan's going to be, because before it's all the chaos of having the baby and taking care of baby, it's really just her thinking about herself and feeling what her body's feeling like and going to doctor's appointments. And so, having these prep conversations, or if the baby's already there, or she's come to you with a toddler, you know, you're still a young, growing, woman. And I want to make sure that you have the time for yourself, that you don't get lost in parenting. Just like I, as a foster mom, or I, as a mother, need time for myself, you're going to need time for yourself. Even though this is your baby, you're also going to need the opportunity to create space, just like any other mom would. And so I want to help you do that. And I want us to come up with a plan where we can do that, where it works for both of us. And you could have some predictability and when you can get time, because I know I like predictability. And then I can be able to support you in a way that can be helpful, because if I have a plan, then we can work toward that. And I always, for me personally, would throw the caveat that I have a very busy schedule and it's very dictated, and I calculate things. And so it needs to be organized. It needs to be predictable. And if we have a plan, you and I can both rely on that. And I'll do my best to meet the needs that you're asking for. And, I just ask that you follow the strategy that we come up with together, so that we can make this work. And then sit down with the calendar, or whatever way, if it's a journal that you guys want to keep, or you want to text, whatever it is, and say, let's practice like what that looks like. So, and then just really like have a demonstration weekend. Like, okay, you're going to go do this, tell me where it's going to be, give me the address. I'll pick you up here, make sure, whatever communication. And then it's like, oh, she really wants me to have, my time, and she really wants to nurture me. And then, too, like, this is, in the parenting side, like, so while I have your baby, tell me some things that you want that are really important to you that I do with your baby. Because that's what a mom would do, right? When you get a babysitter, you tell the babysitter, hey, these are the things that are really important. My baby's gassy, yada, yada, yada. I want you to not hold the baby too much because I don't hold the baby. Or I want you to hold the baby all the time because I'm doing, secure attachment holding baby time, and whatever it is, like, also teach her, oh, I should tell people how they should care for my child, not just when I'm dropping them off, right? Because that's, again, another developmental thing that honestly all mothers kind of need coaching on when they're first starting. And so that way it feels supportive. There's no feeling of you just want to restrict me and make me, have some boundaries. It's like, let's come up with this together. What works for you? What works for me? And I always say, throw out, over time, sometimes things work in the beginning and then they don't work, or we think they're going to work and then they totally don't work. So it's an open door. If this isn't, working for you, if you feel like you need more time, if you feel like you need less time, whatever it is, or if I feel like, I need you to, have less time or more time, then it can be negotiated. And that way it feels like it's not just like, here's a rule and you're in my house and this is what I want to do. That feels so harsh. And then remember, she's a mom. And so she's already in a very, stressful time, very potentially emotional. Certainly there's been, some kind of breach from family that maybe can cause her to feel less supported. And so you want to encourage her to feel like you're on her team.
Absolutely. Our next question is, would you recommend having your team mom participate in extracurricular activities and take time away from being a mother?
Absolutely. Every mom needs that. It is, the secret to, minimizing, postpartum, depressions and anxieties, and sort of just like being overwhelmed, even if it doesn't become clinically significant. Just, it helps to have your own space and time. And remember that this is also a young person still developing in their adulthood and in their competencies and in their ability to go out in the world and make a life for themselves. So they still need the time to be able to develop skills that they need to work on. So beyond school, what if they're an artist, if they sing, if, whatever used to bring them joy, certainly, as all of us do when we become parents, we have to pull back from things because we can't just do everything that we used to do. It's not really possible. But finding some way to give her a sense that she still has some time for herself is really important. Not just because she's a teen, but because she's a teen, but also just as a new mom. So definitely supporting extracurricular activities for sure.
All right. And then can you give more details about secure attachment and why it's beneficial? And do you have any videos or books that you can suggest as resources?
Yes. Secure attachment is the first thing and the most important thing to me as a psychologist when I'm working with someone, a child, adult of any age. It really impacts the way that you deal with life, just completely. So the concept of secure attachment, I talked about it in the PowerPoint, so you guys were able to see that a bit. But in case anybody hasn't seen it, it's just, we come into the world completely vulnerable. Everything that we need, we have to have from our primary caregivers. And if we have that, we feel like the world is safe. The brain says this is a safe place to grow. This is a safe place to explore. The eyes open. The hands start feeling around and touching things. The mouth gets hungry to eat things and to be sucking on things and to be active in the environment because the environment's safe. It's not scary. And you could sort of feel like you'd want to just expand yourself, like as this baby, like, okay, safe world. Okay, mommy's safe, daddy's safe, grandma, okay, neighbor, all these people. And the sense of security that you feel allows your brain to develop, allows your emotional body to develop, and also your physical body to develop. And if you don't have that, then all of those factors, mind, body, spirit, psychology kind of shut down and really go inside and don't feel like it's a safe world. And so it's sort of this narrative that plays out. I hate to say for the rest of your life, but it definitely is very set, and it creates like a sort of default. So maybe you're able to rise from that if you have lots of resilience, if you have reparative experiences, if you, just fortunate enough to be able to come into a different environment and relearn some of those early patterns. But then the baseline for that person is, this is a safe world. This is not a safe world. This is scary. People can hurt you. People who are supposed to feed you and hold you and nurture you leave you for hours in a wet diaper, hungry while you're crying. They ignore you. I can't trust people, but I love you, mommy, and I need you to feed me. So, hi, help me, play with me. And then crying because mom's not there, and ambivalence, is really created too because the primary care providers, you have to have them. You can't decide that you don't want them anymore because you literally need them to live. And so then the sort of narrative is the people that love me hurt me. And you can imagine how that plays out in adulthood and teenage years. And so secure attachment is very important because it can create a deficiency in people psychologically and emotionally. But it's also important because it creates so much resilience for life, for all the potential challenges and unfortunate things that can happen in the course of a life. If you start off with an early childhood experience, and I always say 0 to 7 is something very important to recognize, like from birth to 7 is that really a set window where you're developing those things that set you in a default emotionally and psychologically. If you have that secure attachment, even if at 10 years old you're sexually abused, or you end up in foster care and separated from your family because it was an unfortunate situation, if there's a war, if there's a major car accident, if anything happens in life, at the baseline, you still feel like the world is safe, that you could find a place of peace. Even though you had a bad experience, it's possible that there is someone who could love you because you've been loved. And that stays as a predominant default for the person. And so then they do look for opportunities to make a better situation. And they look for different relationships than the ones that are hurting them. And so all that to say, it's imperative that young people experience secure attachment, and also that the moms are taught why it's so important, especially if they've ended up in foster care. There's been some sort of breach in life. And so for them to know that this is their chance to also set their child up for a better situation is also really valuable. And I want you to ask me that question again, because I feel like there was a second part of the question I wanted to answer.
Yeah, there was a second part. Amy and I were just saying that it was it was covered in the previous section, but it said if so, wait, it says, do you have any videos or books that you can suggest as resources as well?
Yeah, the one of the like the foundational texts for the idea of secure attachment, I want to get the title right. It's Secure Attachment: Parenting from the Inside Out, and it's by Daniel Siegel. And I think that's a good place to sort of start to get a sense of, the concept of secure attachment and why it's so important for parents. But I'll tell you, what I find to be, and as odd as it sounds like for a professional to say, go on YouTube and search, but I really feel like, because depending on where you are in your stage of parenting, the age of the children, where you're living, sort of your cultural demographic, there are so many resources out there for parents regarding secure attachment that I really encourage people to actually like look at videos of demonstrations of secure attachment that are by psychologists and physicians and pediatricians that are really like putting out a lot of information to parents, because it's so much diversity. I mean, I could literally create a link of lists of them. And I may do that actually and add that to my website, because I've been thinking a lot about, people ask me about videos that I would recommend. And there are a whole heap of them that I would, and just can't sort of list outright. And so if you do want to check, I will put a link for a list of secure attachment YouTubes on my website, drsaidapeprah.com. So you can check that out as well.
Excellent. And I also wanted to say thank you for the questions that are coming in. We're fitting them in as the structure allows it. Right now we're on secure attachment, so we're just trying to appropriately fit in the questions. And then our next one is, what are some ways that a teen mom can build a stronger attachment to her baby, specifically if the baby is a little older, like a toddler?
Yeah, just teaching attunement is very important for secure attachment. So attunement is paying attention, listening, noticing needs, and then being sensitive in how you're relating to the needs, fulfilling the needs, addressing the needs. That's really, the foundation of secure attachment is, mommy, I'm hungry, but all I have is one cry. So figure it out. Am I hungry? Am I cold? Am I gassy? So being attuned is like really paying attention to, do you hear the different sound of the cry? What does it sound like when she's hungry? What does she look like? Teaching the mom, pay attention, like right now. And especially this is really easier to do. Unfortunately it's a bias, but if you're a parent, for sure, it's easier for you because you've learned the differences of the cries in your own children, and you've had the experiment of your own life of years and nights after nights after nights to hear the difference between I'm hungry cry, I'm uncomfortable cry. You see grandmoms, young woman will have a baby and the older woman will come, oh, give me the baby. And then she'll pick the baby up and she'll birth the baby and she'll do something and the baby settles and the mom's like, I didn't know what to do. And, the older women are like, yeah, I mean, I raised 5 kids. Like it's all the same once you've mastered it. And so teaching her, if you aren't a parent, then you all are going to learn together. And that's also great because then you get to show the vulnerability of parenting. Like, hey, sometimes even if you've had a child, the thing that worked for your children won't work for other people's children. And so attunement is important because what attunement does is it makes you able to attend to everything and anything a person needs for the first time that you've ever experienced it. That's the whole point of attunement, that I noticed something, let me figure out what it is, let me care, let me be sensitive to it. If the child is a toddler and you can ask them and they can speak about it, then, sort of getting them to communicate that. But even if the child can't speak, toddlers and they're acting out, and they're tantruming, instead of seeing it as something to be upset about, to be agitated about, it's really something to say, okay, something happened in the past hour, or something happened this morning, or maybe something happened last night. I remember my mother used to tell stories about, how if I would tantrum, she would sort of like, if we were out in the world, she would think, well, she didn't have a nap today, or we have been out all day, or it's hot and she hasn't eaten, or what, and sort of, I remember her recounting stories of her recognizing that the circumstances weren't really conducive to having this like really calm toddler out in the world. And so that she would take that on like in herself. And so I think also too, teaching that, like, your child, you have to learn their capacity, and every child is different. Some children, my oldest, she was a ride or die kind of kid. I mean, she never napped, and I was a pretty young, active mom, and I never wanted to be home like for nap time. I just thought it was like so annoying to have to like plan my whole day around the time that she would sleep. But I realized it was because she never really needed that. Like she could go, and even if I would try to be home, she would fight me to sleep and then sleep for 10 minutes and wake back up. And so I just sort of let her like, okay, well, we're going to go out and do stuff until you feel tired. And then we'll just sort of maybe simmer it down and go to the park and you can lay down. But generally, like she could just go and she was active. My second one was a very more regimented personality. She went to sleep at a certain time. She needed long hours of sleep at night. She did not wake up at night. My first one woke up every 2 hours. She is 11 and she still wakes up in the middle of the night and comes by and wants to get in the bed, and just, that's her personality. That's sort of her sleep cycle, and it's the way she is. And the other one still wants to go to sleep early and really likes her downtime. So, you're going to have to pay attention to what they need and, sort of learn to accommodate to that. And I think the experimentation of it with the parent and the foster parent together really is helpful, because then everybody sees that it's about learning and listening and paying attention.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go with a question that was submitted in. Do you have any input or insight on teen moms that come into foster care with a C-sec background? And what have your experiences been? And what can foster parents do with a youth that has a background and a high AWOL history?
Say you said that the teen mom has a C-sec background. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So the child sexual trauma. So do you have any input or insight on a teen mom that comes into foster care with a C-sec background? And what have your experiences been? And what can foster parents do with youth who have a history of AWOL?
Yes. Okay. So I'll start with the history of AWOL. It's very important to be clear about sort of your expectations from the beginning. I also think it's really important for you to recognize that coming into a situation with a teen, specifically that's AWOL, that's a train that's been running a long time, or it's really been like active. And so you're going to do your best as a foster parent to create expectations with them, to have conversations with the social worker about what the social worker's expectation is around your ability to manage that. I was fortunate enough to have a teen mom who was very AWOL and truant and in that way. And not all of them were. Most of them were very active with their children and really, just wanting to kind of keep it home, very well behaved. But one, that's what she had been doing. And I had been told that she's, run away, she's just going to AWOL all the time. And so, even the social worker was like, do your best, but like, don't feel bad if she runs away. And so, we have this long conversation and we talk about everything. And I, tell her, hey, tell me what's going on. And she was very guarded. And that was just sort of the state that she came in. She was very guarded. She did not want to talk about why she kept running away. And, we got through the first week because she went to school, and then Friday came around. We woke up Saturday morning and she was gone. And, it's pretty terrifying. And fortunately, I had a really strong relationship with the social worker. I think she also realized that she should keep her phone on all weekend and be available, because it would be likely that I'd be calling her in an emergency that she's disappeared and I don't know what to do. And so, she really worked with me very actively around, and it's really the social worker's role to then go and like hunt for the child and look for them and things like that. And so, you really are just there to be available once they come back. A lot of times in that case, and if the social worker needs something more from you, they'll let you know. And ultimately, the child, she was very close to aging out. She was 17 and she just really did not want to be in foster care, and she didn't want to, be a part of the system in any way. But I think it's, if they are truant and AWOLing, and you can create a situation where they feel like they can talk to you about what it is that they're so upset about, and that that you will receive them back. I mean, we received her back many times from AWOLing, and I had, frank conversation. I was very scared for you. I was worried, but ultimately, I'm not there to I don't know what is happening with her on the inside. And I don't know what had happened to her prior. And so I didn't want her to feel like she would come back to my house and then be chastised. It's at this point, you're practically an adult. This is scary and it's dangerous. And, you know, I'm sort of just wanting you to know the dangers of the world and why it could be better for you to just be here. And if you want me to drop you off somewhere and come and pick you up, you can do that. If you want me to take the bus with you or show you how to do, you know, sort of get your own transportation, you know, within the guides of how many hours you can be out, then let's work with that. And so that's what I would say is like, try to see if you can work with them to feel like they can get the independence that they want. And I would say it's very important to be reality based with them. Life has been difficult for them for whatever reason. They have not, they don't want to be a part of the system. They want to be independent. And many of us who were teenagers felt that way. You know, give them some empathy around the fact that they feel that way. And, okay, regarding the young women with a child sexual abuse background, you could potentially always have girls that have had that. Many of mine had, and that wasn't what they had, you know, the social worker didn't put that on a stamp and say, hey, just so you know, this child was sexually abused. It was something that came out in personal conversations over the course of our relationship. But I think, again, when you can create a therapeutic relationship, which is what foster parenting gets to be, I mean, an opportunity to heal in a relationship and to have a relationship that's empowering and supportive and loving and nurturing and has proper boundaries and is safe. You know, they're going to test you to see how safe you are. I would say things to think about with a child that's been sexually abused is that they're going to be guarded about you and potentially your, you know, partner, whoever is living in the house with you, your own children, and other people that are around, because they've experienced adults that have, or older children that have broken boundaries with them. And so that level of guardedness is a healthy response from a child that has been sexually abused, because they need to be guarded because people are not always safe. And especially in an environment outside of family where they even maybe feel more vulnerable, you know, that's a reality. And so understand that their guardedness is a healthy coping for themselves, and that the way that they'll undo that is not sort of like just behavioral, like, oh, I'm just going to start trusting people because that's what I'm supposed to do. They're going to have to develop a relationship that makes them feel like you're safe. And then you can help them expand that feeling of safety to people that are in your network that they can learn to feel safe around, and sort of let it grow in a natural way. The other thing too is that, you know, a lot of times they haven't had an opportunity to talk about their sexual abuse. They have just sort of been managing, you know, life and the challenges of whatever's been going on with their family that got them into foster care. And so being available for them to talk and not necessarily asking questions unless it seems like they want you to, like you, if you attune to them, you'll sort of see that they want to say more, but they don't know what to say, you know, and then just to get them an opportunity to talk if they haven't been able to. And then, you know, really encourage with the social workers to set up therapy for them so they have, you know, a professional place to actually process out their trauma. Because, you know, once they're actually in a safe and stable place, that's the time where they can start processing traumas. And if you're able to facilitate that for them, that will be great. And definitely during pregnancy and childbirth, you know, sexual trauma can be triggered because of the nature of the focus on the genitalia, going to doctor's offices and opening your legs for strangers to touch you and evaluate you can be really stressful. And so I would really attune to that. Like, and you could ask it directly or just notice it. Like if it seems like she's really uncomfortable with that, or ask her or say, I know that, you know, you mentioned to me that you were sexually abused and the social worker told me and we've talked about it. How do you feel about the exam providers, you know, doing your OBGYN exams? How do you feel like, you know, feel about having a male doctor versus a female doctor? Maybe you need to advocate for them to just have a female if they're uncomfortable with the males. In the hospital, like if you are able to be with them in their labor, that could be helpful. If you can arrange for them to have a doula who could be with them, because having labor and pregnancy support is very important for a person, a woman in general, but for sure those who've experienced trauma, because the experience, especially in a hospital setting, which most of the foster teen moms will have, can be very off-putting. And all these people with all this power over you as this teen mom, who they don't really often respect you because you're just a kid and you're having a baby, it can be very disempowering, and it can feel very assaulting and very traumatic. And so to have someone who is there to honor your autonomy and to help people respect you in your birthing space is very important, and it can be very healing for her if she's experienced sexual trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you to participant Adriana. Thank you for clarifying the CSEC is the commercially sexually exploited children as well. And we are all out of time. Thank you
No.
so much. Yeah, I know. Is there any like closing quick remarks that you wanted to throw in right before we're finished, or are we all?
Yeah, I'm sure that people have lots more questions.
Yes,
Yeah, who knew that it would just bring out so much? I really appreciate people sending in the questions. I think if we touched on anything, the secure attachment was the one to do, because that would be the one that I would say is for you as foster parents and social workers and those working with the teen moms, that if you can focus on that, that is the number one place to get leverage on creating a better environment for the teen mom, but also for her baby and her children. And if you have more questions for me, again, you can reach out to me. You can sign up for my email list, and I do presentations and topics on various topics. And I can do something like this again, drsaidapeprah.com. And thank you again, CIR, for hosting this topic. And those who are interested, I was really excited to be able to bring this out.
absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the participants too as well. All right.